Good morning. Welcome to the Crafty Canary for In the Word on Wednesday. Today we are looking at another verse on prayer. It is Matthew 5:44. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, I know that this is not generally considered a verse on prayer. It's much more quoted as a verse on love, particularly loving your enemies. But I want to point out that Jesus very specifically tells us to pray for our enemies and to pray for those that persecute us. Most of us do not incorporate this into our prayer lives. I think, though, if we do follow this command of Jesus to pray for those who persecute us, we will be able to much more easily follow his other command to love our enemies. In order to understand this verse more fully, we, of course, must look more at the context. This verse comes from the Sermon on the Mount and is one of those commands where Jesus takes the law and goes beyond the letter of the law and gets to the heart and the spirit of it. Let's look at verse 43 as well as verse 44. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. The interesting thing about this one is that Jesus is referring here to a tradition that the Pharisees had added to Old Testament law. Nowhere does God say to hate your enemy. Nowhere. The Pharisees had implied that their hatred was God's means of judging their enemies, and it had become an accepted part of the Jewish ethic of the day. Jesus turns this tradition, or this ethic, on its ear and tells them that they should do the complete opposite of what the Pharisees had been telling them to do for hundreds of years, to love their enemies and pray for those that persecute them. The NIV Study Bible says, prayer is one of the practical ways love expresses itself. I really love that quote. Don't I pray consistently for the people that I love the most? What would happen if I prayed for those who were awful to me? What if I pray for those that I don't agree with and that say bad things about me? Sometimes we have to go directly against our emotions to obey Jesus' commands. I do not feel like praying for those who persecute me, but I can do it as an act of obedience and love for my Savior. Many times when we obey in this way, the feelings will come later, and Christ will make it possible for us to truly love our enemies from our hearts. I have seen it happen in my own life, where I've not liked a certain person or considered them an enemy, but committed to pray for them, and God changed my heart toward that person. I challenge you this week to do something difficult and something that you may not want to do. Pray for your enemies and see what God will do in your own heart. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.